the scriptures, previous scriptures, everything is confirmed through the Quran. Quran is the only book that is intact, no distortions, no changes, and it confirms previous books and confirms previous messengers and miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I've mentioned the mu'mineen and mu'minat. For example, the miracles of Musa alayhi salam are confirmed in the Quran better than other books, to the point that some of today's modern believers, Christians and Jews, have diluted the whole story of the splitting of the water and so on, whereas Quran confirms it to say every side was like a wall, like a huge wall on every side of the water. There was splitting in the water, it wasn't just subsiding and so on. Why is donating your body to science haram? It's not always the case. There are some exceptions to the rule. It is a matter of fatwa, and we need to, the Maraja, they say, if donating your body is going to result in saving lives, whether it's a limb or the body to research and science, if that is the case, some of the scholars, they say it is okay to donate, saving respectable lives. And that's al-muhtarama. This is very important. Saving respectable lives, then it is permissible. So it's a matter of who is the marja, and basically you have to, it is an issue that there are differences between the marja on this particular issue. Okay, so somebody says, you mentioned that meditation is not recommended. My suggestion is the term meditation is used typically as an alternative to prayers for spirituality. So agnostics and people of no specific faith, in order to gain spirituality, they came up with the term and the concept of meditation, otherwise in Arabic known as riyada. And this riyada is available to Buddhists, to Hindu, and to many other religions, although they may not be speaking to the one God, and they would not be performing a prayer or in supplication, invocation. There's no dua, there's no dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's no tafakkur. If it is tafakkur, if what people are suggesting meditation is reflection, then call it reflection. I have a problem with the term because it could be shared with those who have their own agenda. Okay, to strip. And if you research, there are some, I don't want to promote those authors, but there are some who are suggesting you can gain spirituality without religion, and their claim is based on the concept of yoga and other practices, and meditation is their term. And so I urge mu'mineen and mu'minat to be sharp. Al-mu'minu kayyisun fatin, wa laysa kiyyis khutun. The believer should be sharp and understand things even if it's not said. And the same words, if you take some dots and change some accents, it becomes a bag of cotton. So a believer is sharp and intellectual and not a bag of cotton. Inshallah, we understand that. Let us be wise in using terms and borrowing terms from others or borrowing concepts from others. Assess them with our religion. There is nothing that can give you, and this is it's not my claim. It is the suggestion of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. There is nothing that can give you as much spirituality and connection and relief as prayers, if used properly. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, what is wrong with you guys if you are in greed, ham and gham, that you don't resort to salah? Go and pray to salah. Salah is the most powerful of spirituality. Why do I need meditation and some other practices? And I have said it many times to Mu'mineen and Mu'minat. It may have its, it may work, it may have its good results, but it's nowhere near what we have in our scripture, in our books, in our ahadith, in our traditions from the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt sallallahu alayhi ajma'in. If I don't want to say any more because I think I've said enough about this. Are there questions? Shall we?
Yes. People can vote as questions.
Oh, okay, that makes it. So how do I mark that I've answered it? So I don't have to.
You can. I don't think so.
Okay, so
I think the admin should remove the questions.
I see.
Do you want to continue because the questions are a lot?
Okay. So can someone?
We're gonna figure it out next.
What's answered, so it's not.
Next time, inshallah. Next time.
I think one more question, and that should suffice for today, inshallah, or tonight. Should we practice? I don't know if that question is good for now. I don't know. I have to say, I mean, this is a day of celebration, yes? We're celebrating, so I have to say this question, and I have to, is there a way of finding out who voted?
No.
No? Are you sure?
Yes, there is no.
Okay, so we have a question about polygamy and its benefits for spirituality. I don't know who asked that question.
What is the
It's
question?
anonymous. And it's voted, and it's the second one in the order. Do you see it? Is there at least a way of figuring which side of the hall? Yes.
Just because this is an open crowd,
Yes.
to also remind people that their questions have to be appropriate for all ages. You can't have little ones in here with some specific questions. So
Awesome.
I would suggest, if I can humbly suggest, that we meet a specific topic, let's say salah or transaction.
Yeah.
And the questions are about that. Otherwise, this is going to be a Pandora's box, and
Yes.
you're going to have a lot of strange questions.
Awesome. So I second that. Let us keep it to the topic or something that you are, it's of a serious concern. Your job has this, I mean, you're facing in your job or something of that nature, then it's okay. Let's stay away from what ifs and hypothetical situations. Let's get to practical issues that we are facing. If you have a practical issue that we need to discuss, by all means, and obviously the ladies did not like that. They marked it inappropriate for the age. Not this No. Just, inshallah, that will suffice in terms of questions. The discussion that we had for tonight, sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. I want to keep it very brief, inshallah. We have already taken quite a bit of time. In light of the celebrations that we had last week, the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, and the birth of his grandson, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi I wanted to have a discussion on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and taught and elaborated by Ahlul Bayt, specifically by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. First, in in terms of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one thing I want to mention and remind mu'minat, the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced himself in the Holy Quran in the most significant ayah. One of the youth asked a question, why is the surah not starting with this ayah, or this part of the ayah, which is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, especially about this ayah, he says, this is أعظم آية في القرآن, and it was targeted by the enemy. عملوا إلى أعظم آية في القرآن يزعم أنها ليست من القرآن, to suggest that it's not part of the Quran. And it's sad that until today so many Muslims, despite knowing that it is the first ayah of Surah Al-Fatiha, when they start their salah and they, after takbirah, either they don't say Bismillah or say it quietly. I don't know what is their problem. Why would where is your intellect? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins the Quran in the order that the Prophet taught the people. The order of the Quran that we have today is the order that God intended and the Prophet gave to the people. This is what we believe, contrary to what some others may suggest, that it was compiled after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My question to them, why is Al-Fatiha called Al-Fatiha? My question is, why does Quran refer to itself as Kitab? Kitab is not Suhuf. Suhuf is basically copies, different copies or skins that different things are written on them and they're compiled separately. Kitab is a compilation that's all together. Quran refers to itself as Kitab. Quran says that the Prophet ﷺ has no right to utter anything of the Quran without the angel telling him or without God directing him. And then the same ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the compilation and the gathering of the Quran is upon us. إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا جَمْعَهُ وَقُرْآنَهُ فَإِذَا قَرَأْنَاهُ فَاتَّبِعْ قُرْآنَهُ. It is upon us that we compile it. It is upon us that we reveal it to you, tell you what to read, where and when, and when we say it, you follow whatever the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. The first ayah, Surah Al-Fatiha, As-Sab'a Al-Mathani, the first ayah out of the seven, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear to every one of us that He wants us to remember His attributes of Rahman. The two attributes related to His mercy. Rahman. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. He doesn't say Bismillah al-Alim, al-Hakim. All of these beautiful attributes belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَيَّمَّا تَدْعُوا فَلَهُ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى. The 99 are just one narration that combines the 99 Asma'ul Husna. It is not limited to that, because the name of God will fill the universe and will never be, in fact, will never run out. The beautiful name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Out of all of these beautiful names, He wants us to remember and constantly reminds us of Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. And He repeats it in Surah Al-Fatiha after Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Once again He tells us Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. One of the most significant concepts that He wants us to remember. Why? We'll come, inshallah, if we have the chance, we'll discuss why is it so significant. Nevertheless, when He introduced His messenger, He also introduced him as Rahmatan lil Alamin. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. This is His messenger. What is the meaning of Rahman and Rahim? And is it the same as the concept that we're familiar with, the Rahman that we are familiar with and aware of? This is very important. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam gave us some headlines about what is God's mercy and how do we understand God's mercy. In Nahj al-Balagha, al-Sharif al-Rabi quotes Amir al-Mu'mineen as he describes the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, it's headlines. When it came to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, sallallahu alayhi the Imam sallallahu alayhi elaborated. It was no longer just a few words about what is the Rahman and what is the Rahim, how is God al-Rahim. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, Rahimun la yusafu bil-riqqa. Rahimun la yusafu bil-riqqa. He is Rahim, but you cannot describe him as one who is Raqib, is somebody whose heart is a state of the heart. Riqqa is a state of the heart. And I'll explain. If you're not interested in our discussion, please take your conversation elsewhere. Sallallahu Rahimun la yusafu bil-riqqa. What does that mean, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam elaborates beautifully. There are two ahadith from the Imam regarding Rahmaniyya and Rahimiyya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also regarding the opposite of Rahim, which is the concept of ghadab. In the Quran, we are told that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has special Rahman, He is the Rahman, He is the Rahim. And also in many ayat we read, كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرَّحْمَةِ. He made it mandatory for himself to have mercy, to have rahmah. So what is that mercy that he made mandatory for himself? In the Quran, we don't have much elaboration. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Rahimun la yusafu bil-riqqa. So what does it mean? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he explains. He says, when it comes to any of those states that we are, or attributes that we are giving to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who gives himself, it is never like our emotions. Riqqa is the state of the heart. Ghadab, often when we say somebody is angry, when we say this will anger Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So question, what happens if somebody gets angry? There, initially it's a state in the heart, an emotion in the heart, yeah? And how does it reflect itself? There is rage. The blood, the heart starts beating fast, there's rage, perhaps changing the color, and then there are some actions. Yes? As a result of that ghadab, there are some actions. That's ghadab. What about rahmah? I have to bring both to make this clear. Rahmah, for us, it's an emotion. You look at some orphan, for example, or you might see a kid who's in some poor part of the world. That is, there was a picture that many of you may have seen at some point. A girl going into, rising on or climbing on her, some other girl, trying to go into a dumpster to find some food. And that picture spread. And a lot of people emphasize the initial thing is riqqa. That in the heart that you feel that emotion, that you're extremely sad, you might have a tear, and your state of the heart changes. The angry heart is different to a heart of somebody who is in mercy, who is extremely sad, extremely disappointed with something that they're seeing. That state then leads to one wanting to do something good. For example, they might use that picture or those videos and make you more charitable. So as a result, what do? You get into your wallet and get some money, or nowadays perhaps do something online, send some money to some poor parts of the world, or organizations that are taking care of those charities and so on. All of this is the result of that state that is in the heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have those changed states. He doesn't have it's not like the heart of you and I, that at one moment we are angry because something angered me, so now I'm angry, I'm raging, I want to do something, as a result, so I do that action, okay, whatever the action follows. Or that merciful heart that I feel in my, that feeling in my heart, and therefore, as a result, I decide I want to do something positive, I want to do something good, charitable, help someone. Those changes do not occur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as-samad. Let us be very careful. When we read Quran, let's understand what we're saying. One of the meanings of samad actually is that there is no change that occurs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, one of the meanings is lam yalid wa lam yulad. One of the meanings of samad is that he is never born and he does not give birth to anyone. Okay? That itself is another level of saying there's no change to him. It's not like one day he was a child to somebody, and the next day he's going to be a father to somebody. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He is as-samad. He does not change. He doesn't, one day he has mercy, the next day he's angry. Or one day he makes him happy, and one day none of those occurs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then what is it? What is this issue? The effects of when something angers us, what do? Let's say a good reason to be angered is you see someone oppressing someone else. Okay, so you see an oppressive person harming someone else, and you get angry and you go and stop them. Yes, you want to take revenge from the oppressor who oppressed someone, who is the oppressed, against who basically committed some crime against the oppressed. That action of ghadab is what Allah, the Imam, is teaching us. What you can attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that action which is the result of. Not that he had an emotion and therefore it led into an action. Because then you might ask, can he have all these emotions at the same time? How does it work? That's not something we can attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Rahman, is Ar-Rahim, is Shadidul Iqam, is Ghafur Rahim, all at the same time, because it is not a change of state. It is based on what we subject ourselves to. If I subject myself to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I receive His mercy. If I subject myself to the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I receive the wrath of Allah. It is based on what we subject ourselves to. In fact, the same thing, the same occurrence that could be the result of one subjecting themselves to the wrath of God could be a mercy to another person. Examples are many. I'll give you a Quranic example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when a people oppressed others, They usurp the rights of others. They attack and harm us. The Prophet of their time and the believers at their time were so bothered and tired of the oppression of those people that they couldn't do anything themselves. They were a minority, and the oppressive were the majority. They were powerful. They had numbers. They had all the resources. Therefore, the believers themselves could not help themselves or save the oppressed. As a result, God gives response, gives time. Eventually, the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes, and sometimes a nation is destroyed. A city is destroyed. At the same time as this is happening, some are receiving the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as those are receiving the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to some of his messengers, leave your city. Leave the city, you and the believers. A very good example is Nuh alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, you get in the ship with your family and the believers. Family here refers to those who are following him, not just blood relatives, because his own wife and his own son were not on board. Family or ahli here refers to those who are not just relatives blood-wise, but also blood. And the believers, وَمَنِ اتَّبَعَكَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. The believers, get in the ship, you're safe. The flood happens. It's the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, but it's also the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The believers receive so much ridiculing, harm. The narrations say they used to not. Quran speaks elaborately about the ridiculing of the people that they subjected Nabiullah Muhammad to so much ridiculing, so much harm. Riwayat mentioned that they used to beat him up until he would lose consciousness and throw him at his doorstep. And they would do that time and time, again and again. You stop talking against our gods and against our traditions and culture and the way of life that we have, or else. What? They would beat him up, throw him at his door. So their destruction is what? The mercy. So at the same time, that occurrence which has the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, nothing is empty of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing is. In Dua Kumail, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam teaches Kumail to say and begin with what? Asking God, برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء. I ask you by your mercy that it encompasses everything. There's a hadith. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is also telling us that. He says God has created things and created their opposites. Allah. One of the things he created is ghadab. And he created the opposite of that is rahmah. And he made rahmah stronger than ghadab. SubhanAllah. He made mercy stronger than wrath. In fact, if you want to impact your world, if you want to impact your own family, you need to use which one? Our immediate reaction to something going wrong is what? Wrath. Correct? And I'm speaking here for myself, a reminder for me before any one of you. The immediate thing that we have when something goes against our wishes is what? Anger. Wrath. Yes? And so our reaction are based on what? Wrath, anger, ghadab. If you want to be more impactful, you need to switch. You ask child psychologists, you ask social workers, you ask any specialist, what is more effective? Anger or love, mercy? Which one is more effective? You'll find that they'll tell you love and mercy is more effective. With your spouse, with your children, with your neighbors, with people around you, friends, colleagues, classmates, whoever it is, you name it. Love and mercy is more impactful, more effective, and longer lasting. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded us of His mercy. He introduced Himself with His mercy, not their wrath. He introduced Himself, although, remember, both of those are not emotions. God does not have those emotions. Don't get it wrong. The results, it's all the results of mercy is what we see from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You subject yourself, you do something good, God gives you rahmah. You submit to God, He gives you rahmah. What does it translate to? Translates to all beautiful things around you. Good family, good children, good, not wealth that is in numbers, wealth that you can enjoy. Hayatan tayyibah, a good life. You get that if you subject yourself to the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You subject yourself, God forbid any of us subject ourselves to the ghadab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we'll receive nothing but ma'ishatan dhanka. Quran tells us that we will have a horrible life, filled with difficulties, unloyal spouse, undutiful children, things going against you when it is most significant. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, he says, he says in Baha Makarim al-Akhlaq, Ya Allah, make my most lucrative or my most abundant sustenance when I am most in need of it. إِذَا كَبَرْتُ, when I'm older. Imagine one who's comfortable when they're younger and they get all that money, and all of a sudden as they get older and they cannot produce anymore or as much, they start suffering, struggling financially. How ugly is that equation? That is literally the opposite of failure. Why? Most of the time, it is because they subjected themselves to a level of the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They need to get purified here. And it's all based on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't forget. It all comes back to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it is our choice which one we want to subject ourselves to. We subject ourselves to His mercy, then we have hayatan tayyibah, and then return to our Lord and receive the exclusive mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rahimiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And God forbid if we don't, then we are subjecting ourselves to what is already set in the formative, in the takween of this universe, in the formative level of the creation. When God created the universe, certain things subject us to His mercy, and certain things subject us to His wrath. He formed it in this way. It is not an emotion. He does not change His heart, and so none of that occurs. It is simply what we subject ourselves to. The Imams of Ahlul Bayt sallallahu alayhi have continuously and repeatedly reminded us of exposing ourselves and making ourselves subjects to receive the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His mercy is closer. It is closer. It is more powerful. And no matter how far we go, that's part of His mercy. how far away we go when you return, لَوَجَدُوا اللَّهَ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا. They become subjects of the special mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tawwaban, oft returning, He is the returner. He returns for us to return to Him, not returns physically. And He is there specially merciful. If you return, you will find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Tawwaban Rahim. I'll finish with a hadith from Imam Zayn alayhi salam in response to an ignorant yet supposedly or self-proclaimed scholar of religion of the early times. He lived at the time of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam, and Imam Ali alayhi salam referred to him as Samiri of this ummah. And Samiri hadhihi al-ummah, Hassan al-Basri, he had his issues. I don't want to get into the details about him. He made a statement, and it became famous. He says that I fear for the people, I'm not surprised by those who are saved. How are they, I'm not surprised by those who perish. How do they perish? I am surprised by those who are saved. How are they saved? Ajibtu and the other one, based on what he is suggesting, basically, that it's easier to be perished than to be saved. Imam Zayn alayhi salam, he says, in response to that, he says, in fact, the real surprise is for those who perish. How do they perish? Because I am not surprised by those who are saved, how they are saved, and then the Imam refers or addresses the mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, and he says, because I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Rahman and the Rahim. Therefore, it is no surprise when people are saved. We're closer to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than we are to His wrath. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us wisdom and the opportunity to learn the truth through the school of the Prophet and his family, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, especially learn about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and follow the path to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ask for the intercession of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بك عرفتك وأنت دللتني عليك. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who listen to what's said and follow what's said. والحمد لله رب العالمين.